Hello and welcome back, Eddie Radosovich. George Stoia here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. Just wrapped up a weekly press conference with Brent Venables. Had some rather interesting things to say. Obviously, his first, media public comments. Obviously, had the coaches show on Monday night. We'll get into a little bit of that. Obviously, named Jackson Arnold the starter as Oklahoma 4-3 heads down to Oxford this weekend to take on Ole Miss. And yeah, they got their work cut out for them. There's no doubt about that.
I think they do the rest of the season. You look at this schedule, and it's daunting, and all of a sudden you're making a change at play caller, and you don't really know what's going on at quarterback. I know he named Jackson the starter. I don't think that means that there's no chance we see Michael Hawkins at some point the rest of the year. So very interesting. I thought his comments on the move and why he did it, why he promoted Joe Jon, what Kevin Johns can maybe bring to the table were all interesting, but I think he was also pretty honest about, hey, look, everyone's at fault. It's not all on Seth Littrell, and to think that this thing is just going to get fixed by making this move, I think you'd be a little bit naive. So I think that he thinks there can be a spark here. You know, we'll get into what the offensive coordinator search might look like, who they might be interested in, but moving forward this week, talk about a tough position to be put in if you're Joe Jon Finley and Kevin Johns.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, we'll obviously have a little bit more with, on Jackson Arnold. And it kind of struck me, but you mentioned when we got back from the press conference, this would be Jackson Arnold's first road start, which I think a lot of people obviously thought was going to be at Auburn when the season began. But it's kind of a whole new can of worms. And obviously, with the new offensive coordinator, the new play caller, and Joe Jon Finley, certainly going to be interesting. The news was made on Sunday. You saw our instant reaction on Sunday night. You saw the game day rewind with Josh McCuistion, just in getting his thoughts on the move. And then we heard from Brent Venables on Monday night during his coach's show. Plenty of content coming out of that one. You can check all of that out on SoonerScoop.com. But on Tuesday, Brent Venables talked to the media for the first time about the move of firing Seth Littrell on Sunday night, the elevation of Joe Jon Finley to official Oklahoma play caller for the final 5 games of the season in an interim basis, and then the elevation of Kevin Johns, who, I don't think a lot of people know a whole lot about.
I mean, he's got more pedigree than a lot of people. He's been all over the place. The offensive coordinator last year at Duke, which was pretty successful with Riley Leonard at quarterback, Mike Elko's crew. They were pretty good offensively. Was at Indiana under Kevin Wilson. So he spent some time at some Power 5 programs. Has called plays before. He won't be calling plays for Oklahoma, but I think he could maybe help Joe Jon, who's never done it before, and he's coached quarterbacks. I don't think anybody else on staff really had that same background. Seth Littrell never really coached quarterbacks in his career before, so now all of a sudden you have a guy that's done that. Maybe he can give some good insight to some young quarterbacks, make some things easier to understand for them. But still, he's been put into a position that, the way Brent talked about it, you'll hear in the clip, but he wasn't really a part of the offensive game planning situation. So what does that look like? Does he add to that? Does he just kind of give a fresh perspective? What does that look like? I'm not sure.
It is interesting. Before we get to the Brent Venables stuff, Joe Jon has called plays one time before.
Oh, really?
At Missouri, he called the plays against Texas for Missouri when Josh Heupel went to Central Florida. So they played him in a bowl game.
Who won that game?
33-16 was the final score. Texas won, and it doesn't sound like it went very well. So there you go, positives. But no, he has though.
But he has, yeah.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't realize that
I heard somebody
either.
say that this morning on the way down to Norman for the press conference, which kind of caught me off guard. I didn't think he had before. Certainly didn't remember that. There in the bowl game. I don't even remember what bowl game. It might have been an Alamo Bowl.
The Drew Lock game where Tom Herman was making fun of Drew Lock on the sideline or something?
Yeah, I believe so. It was the Houston Bowl, I believe. Texas and Missouri, 2017. Without further ado, here is Brent Venables talking about everything that goes into the coaching change, the staff shakeup, whatever you want to call it, on Tuesday.
As I said on my radio show last night, we made a decision to make a change at offensive coordinator and step Coach Finley, along with Kevin Johns, into new roles, working together. Coach Johns to coach our quarterbacks, and Coach Finley and the rest of the staff, Kevin included, putting together game plans, and we'll call it on game days. Incredibly hard decision on many levels, and then, a 10,000-foot lens, not so difficult. We're not playing winning football on that side of the ball, and thought a change would be appropriate, and a change in leadership, a new voice, a new perspective, a new lens, strategy, game planning, sequencing, all of those things that go along with that position. So, but they'll all work together. And again, when you have a play caller, ultimately everything goes for him. He makes those decisions on what we either are and aren't going to do. And but there'll be a real strong collaboration. Whatever we have been doing hadn't been working. So, with a fresh start for everybody, we're hopeful we'll get a little bit better. Well, again, being a quarterback coach and an offensive coordinator, he's got both of those lenses so from fundamentals, game prep, knowing what the quarterback should see, what he shouldn't see. He's got high-level success in regards to where he's been at both coordinating and coaching the quarterbacks. So whether that was at Duke or it's at Memphis, it's at Indiana, and some of the other places, that he's been. And so, he hit the ground running yesterday. And he was like a pig in the mud. And I think that a fresh perspective will, be an opportunity for the quarterbacks to grow and see it from, again, not only a different voice, but a different lens.
Enjoy Vision might need to clip that, the fresh perspective portion of that.
Yeah.
I thought the same, Kerry. Just in terms of Kevin Johns, I'm kind of caught in between. I'm, I guess, excited in a way to see what he can bring to the offense, that it's obviously struggling. We'll see what Joe Jon Finley can do in terms of scheme with Bill Beatenbow and trying to get something out of that offensive line that we've talked about. But what is a realistic expectation for what somebody like a Kevin Johns can do now that he goes into the quarterback room? Brent said on Tuesday that he'd be running the meetings now. Obviously, he has a relationship or something of a relationship with those guys, but I don't know. Can you get development over the last 5 games of the season, I guess would be my question.
I think so. I think there's certainly, there's obviously room for growth, right, from that group. So I think that Kevin Johns can maybe simplify some things. He's worked in several different offensive schemes and systems. I'm sure he can teach them some of those things. But honestly, Eddie, I think that the expectation should not. I don't want to say that you should all of a sudden be like, oh, they're going to come out and play great offensively or at the quarterback position, because there's a lot of other issues. We've talked about it extensively everywhere else. But I do think that inside that quarterback room, when they're watching film or out on the practice field, if it's Kevin Johns just talking to him a little extra than what he was previously, which I do think he was pretty involved with the quarterbacks, I think that can help, obviously. But and like Brent said, maybe it's just a different voice. Sometimes that's all you need is somebody else talking to you.
It kind of seemed like that on Tuesday, and we've heard from him now on Monday night at the coaches show and obviously on Tuesday at the press conference. But it does seem like, if nothing else, this is kind of like that last-ditch effort of at least you get something new in there. At least you get a new voice, a new leadership, a new idea, maybe a new scheme. Not necessarily that they're going to change everything overnight, but you got to try something. This is kind of the last-ditch effort with this group.
Well, and part of you hear Brent talk about it. He's like, last 2 years, it was the same staff other than Jeff Lebby, and they were pretty damn good offensively. Now, the personnel was different. They had some different playmakers, whether it was Eric Gray a couple years ago at running back, Marvin Mims at wide receiver. They don't have those type of players. Dylan Gabriel at quarterback. The offensive line had a couple first-round draft picks.
Which I think is it's a massive, massive deal. I mean, I'm at the point, and I told you earlier, that I think that problem 1A, 1B, 1C might all be offensive line right now, because there's so many plays that are just completely done by the time the quarterback catches the snap.
Yeah, and we'll get into, Brent had, I thought, some revealing answers on the offensive line, but in terms of quarterback play, it's going to be really hard. I mean, again, these guys can grow a lot at the end of the season. And I think you got to kind of just roll with Jackson and hope that, all these reps will matter and help him get better. But in terms of this staff, I do think there's good coaches on this staff. Like, these guys have coached a lot of football. A lot of these guys, other than Kevin Johns, have been in this program for some time now. I do think that they can collaborate together and find a way to at least get this offense somewhat moving in the right direction. Like Brent said, over the last 24, 48 hours, it's just about getting some incremental improvement. It's not about whole changes and totally complexing things, right? Like, and just going in a different direction. It's like, I think it's almost like going back to square one and just see if you can't just get a little bit better every single week. I don't know if that results in wins because of who they're playing, but if you can see some of that and they do start moving the ball and you see some growth from a guy like Jackson Arnold, then you feel maybe a little bit better about yourself at the end of the year. It
will be interesting to see how the quarterback situation is handled over the next couple weeks. You asked Brent on Tuesday just in terms of how are you going to handle this? Because we've talked about it at length, obviously, since the decision was made on Sunday night. You got Michael Hawkins Jr., obviously the true freshman, and then Jackson Arnold in his second season. And I think that there is a reality with the unknown of what's to come at the offense coordinator position. Do you want to have one of those guys? You would love to have at least one of those guys back in 2025, but
you would think
it's a very delicate situation.
It's complicated and it's kind of a mess, right? Because, like you said, you'd probably like to keep both of them just because you don't want to go into a situation where you don't have somebody with at least some experience as your backup, but you also might lose both of them to the portal. And you mentioned you'd like to have at least one of them back. We'll see that too. I think that's also a question. If Jackson and Michael both go out in these last 5 games and don't play well, maybe Oklahoma goes, well, maybe we could get a lot better in the portal, because we see it all the time. Starters who are really good into the portal that maybe you don't ever expect. Sure. Cam Ward this last year leaves Washington State. He's been phenomenal for Miami. Dylan Gabriel, right? Like, these guys that are proven guys sometimes end up in the portal.
Perhaps a little bit of a different situation, but Kevin Johns was on a staff last year that saw Riley Leonard head up to Notre Dame. Now, Mike Elko leaving, I'm sure, had a little bit of an effect on that. I can't remember if those coincided with one another, but same idea. Yeah, there's always guys in the portal that
even backups. Backups. Sure. I mean, if Michael Hawkins enters, there'll be a lot of programs that would like him. And then from the quarterback's perspective, there's just a lot of unknown for them to answer that question right now. So it's kind of an unfair question to ask them. But everybody's curious because, look, they were recruited by Jeff Lebby. He's gone. And then they were coached by Seth Littrell, who they decided to stick around at OU for. He's gone.
Sure.
And so now all of a sudden they're sitting there going, okay, the 2 guys that we came to Oklahoma to play for, not just Brent Venables, but their position coach, their offensive coordinator, the guy that they believe in their scheme, they're both gone now. And so I'm sure they're both wondering, okay, who's going to be the next guy? Do I want to stay here where I've also been benched by the head coach? Each of them have both been benched now. You don't know what the offensive line is going to look like next season. You don't know which playmakers are going to be back, which we will get into that a little bit later. So I think all of that stuff, all those questions, you'd love to have an answer right now on, what day is it? October what?
22nd.
22nd? Probably not going to have an answer till at least November 30th or after, right? When they play their final game.
I think you'll start having a little bit maybe better idea.
I think we already have a better idea of who they might want to pick if they had to pick one, and that's them choosing Jackson to start this week. I don't know. I think that that's also just because he came in and played somewhat well on Saturday. But I do think that how these last 5 games go is going to be somewhat of an indication of, hey, if we got to pick one, this is the guy we're rolling with.
No doubt. Here is Brent's answer to George's question on Tuesday, just in terms of the delicate situation with Jackson Arnold and Michael Hawkins, as well as the decision to go with Jackson on Saturday in Oxford.
I think they both have been focused on just controlling what they can control and being in the moment here right now, and recognizing the need to be in the moment so that they can be prepared and have a chance to play and be the guy. So, whether or not they have spent any extended amount of time thinking about, the future and things of that nature, I don't know. For me, how have I handled it? I'd just be open and honest and transparent, lots of communication. This is a game of development. This is a game of performance. And, in some ways, those positions and how you coach them and, what the expectations are shouldn't be any different than what you look at any other position. And, but, I think having great self-awareness probably puts them in a good place, even though there's some discouragement with that when you're not playing as well as or as well as you want to. But young players sometimes play like young guys, and they get better the more they play, the more they're around it, the more they watch it, the more they practice it. And that would be the expectation, with those guys, moving forward. But as far as speculating on their futures and things like that, just focus on, trying to get better today.
I know you also said that last night that Jackson's going to be the starter. What went into that decision was just based off of Saturday's performance. Then could we see Michael at all?
Yeah, you never know if you can see somebody. I can't predict. You go out there and again, it's 21-0 because you throw, turn the ball over 3 straight possessions again. You'll look at everything. So, what went into it, Jackson stepped in and played pretty well. Took care of the football, put one on the ground, recovered it, made a lot of really good decisions in the game, took command right from the get-go, had, again, several drops that would have made the day even better for him, individually. So that's what went into it.
Certainly would be a help for the Oklahoma offense if they're able to get some of these wide receivers back. Brent Venables did very candid interview session, whatever you want to call it, appearance on its coach's show on Monday night. He finally went almost list by list of all the guys that are injured. And one of those guys that I think that we kind of expect back this week is Deion Burks, who went through pregame warmups. We had heard the 80% max volume a week ago. Here he is before the game on Saturday. I kind of thought the way that he was moving around that he was going to give it a go.
Too.
You reported on Monday night he participated in practice on Monday, which is, if you're going to take any good news right now, and I think that the offensive side of the football would take any news, it does sound a positive on him, as well as maybe the rest of the group coming back at some point this year.
Yeah, look, you check my mentions, and you would have thought Deion Burks quit the football team a few weeks ago. That is actually not true, as well as some of these other wide receivers. But, yeah, I think Deion's going to try and give it a go this week. And I think the interesting thing about the receiver situation is Brent said last night on his coach's show, all these guys are talking about returning next year.
And that is Andrel Anthony, Nick Anderson, Jaden Gibson, obviously, coming off the patella injury that Brent talked about on Monday night. And then, obviously, maybe possibly Burks.
And Farouk.
And Jalil Farouk, correct.
So,
and we expect, and you've talked about this here for the last couple of weeks, even before the Texas game, Jalil Farouk wants to get back onto the field in 2024.
Definitely. And I think that he's a guy that I know that he wants to make it to the NFL. I think he needs to show a little bit more on his tape. So he's hoping to come back this year, kind of get back into the groove of things, coming off that foot injury. And, we talked about it when it first happened. Would he want to come back after 6 to 8 weeks? Sounds like he's trying to. The Missouri game is the one that I would circle as the earliest. If not the Missouri game, I think Alabama after the bye week. And when you look at it, I think I've said this on here a couple of times, but he's only played in one game.
Right.
So he could play 3 games. They could even, if they make a bowl game, he could play in that. Doesn't count to your red shirt. So he could play in the Missouri, Alabama, LSU game and the bowl game, and he could redshirt and come back next season. So that's all positive news. Andrel Anthony sounds like he's still kind of battling the setbacks. Just had some scar tissue that's been an issue for him. It sounds like he wants to try and play this season.
He had the last scope the Wednesday of the Tennessee week,
which
right?
At this point, though, Andrel, I would probably tell him, hey, man, just get as healthy as you can. Don't rush it back. Maybe you see him at the end of the season just to see if he can go out there and play a little bit. But I wouldn't totally expect him back. Nick Anderson sounds like is a long shot this year. I know Brent said that it's a pretty bad torn quad.
Yeah, officially said it, though, and I think that he's been a guy that has been speculated about, whether right or wrong. Obviously, there's been a lot of wrong out on the internet, but I don't know. If nothing else, I guess it makes you feel not better about the situation, but it's like, okay, he is definitely hurt, and I think that can quiet a bunch of rumor and innuendo that's outside of the program right now.
All the speculation about him, quitting on the team or that he didn't want to come back, and we'll see. I mean, I think that if he wanted to go to the NFL, somebody would maybe give him a chance. I don't think he'd get drafted. You only have one season of tape. You would think he'd want to come back. And again, these guys somewhat probably depends on who you hire as an offensive coordinator. If they bring in a new wide receivers coach, I know they all love Emmett Jones, and he's done a great job recruiting. There's a bunch of young guys coming in. But certainly if Oklahoma can even get a couple of those guys back next season, you would expect Jaden Gibson for sure to come back next year. Deion Burks was not somebody I even thought about coming back next season. We'll see how, if he goes out and has just a monster final 5 games, it wouldn't shock me if he were to jump to the NFL. But if you could get a couple of those guys back next year, talk about a great start to go into 2025.
Certainly would be welcomed help for Jackson Arnold as he gets prepared for his first road start. It's now time to tell you guys all about homefieldapparel.com. Obviously, they've been with us all season. All you got to do is go to homefieldapparel.com, 15% off your first order using promo code SCOOP. As you see there on the screen, the bomber jackets are back in stock. On Thursday, October 24th, the Campus Classic Pullover Southern Collection will be available. As you can see here, they've already released some of them for other schools. Oklahoma's version, the 90s pullover here, as you see on the screen, will come out on October 24th. So that's coming up on Thursday. Don't know if you could get it in time to get down to Oxford with it, but I think the weather's going to be pretty nice. Probably aren't going to need a pullover.
Could use it for the main game.
Fingers crossed you need it for the main game.
Is it going to be cold?
No, it's going to be hot AF like it
At
has
the main
been.
Game?
Well, I don't know. That's coming up
in
next
November?
week, obviously, but I don't know.
Certainly the Alabama game, I would think.
Yeah, possibly, hopefully.
Yeah, it would be cold.
It's about time we start getting some.
Those
of
are
that
sweet though,
better
and even
weather
the
around
other
here.
schools ones like that Nebraska Cornhuskers
Yeah,
one.
it's
That's
old school.
That's a sweet logo.
It's old school. Everything you can find at homefieldapparel.com. 15% off your first order using the promo code SCOOP. Shout out. It was good to see them. What was that? The Tulane weekend.
Yep.
Have them in town and basically sold them out of everything that they brought. So, all right, let's get back to it. There was a lot of conversation. There's been a lot of conversation. You're coming out of a game against South Carolina last Saturday in which you allowed a school record 9 sacks. They are 132nd. I think that everybody knows that number by now in sacks allowed. That is second to last in college football. Just think about that for a second. It's still hard to grasp.
Is it Kennesaw State or Kent State? Or
I believe so. Or
something
no,
like
it's
that?
South Carolina, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But it must be a different stat that I'm thinking OU's only ahead of Kennesaw
I
State.
think
Maybe
that
it's like
is
efficiency or something.
Maybe offensive efficiency or
Something like
EPA
that.
possibly
It's not
from
good.
ESPN.
Across the
It's
board.
all an S
Yeah.
show right now. And, I think that we've talked about it. We talked about it with Josh on the Game Day Rewind on Monday here on the Scoop channel. They got to figure something out. It cannot continue for this offense to even remotely find any newfound success. They have to be better up front.
And the problem is, Eddie, and we'll hear from Brent, I don't think it's getting any better because I think the heart of the issue is they don't have a ton of talent there.
Sure.
I just don't see it. I know some of these guys were highly recruited, a Jacob Sexton, a Jake Taylor. Those guys haven't been great this year.
They've had nice spots, but they've obviously somebody like a Jacob Sexton who we love the family. He had a rough game against South Carolina, maybe his worst.
And I don't necessarily blame him completely. He's getting moved in all these different directions. He's having to play left tackle, left guard. Like he's getting moved all over. That's a really tough spot to be in as a young player. So I don't necessarily blame him for all of it. But you look at this offensive line. We talked about it all offseason. They had to rebuild it through the portal, and they missed on some guys in the portal. But the reason they had to build in the portal is they whiffed on guys a few years ago in recruiting. And whether that's Bill Beedenbow's fault, I know Lincoln Riley, we don't talk about Lincoln a ton on here, and it's long gone. But I think that was also, somewhat on his plate in terms of the lack of ability to land some of those top guys. You lose a Caden Green in the portal last year, who would certainly help this football team right now. I don't think he fixes all of these issues, but he would help you. And I think that's what it boils down to. It's not so much that they need to scheme it up better. I think that they can do some things maybe to cover up some of those holes, but the bottom line is they don't have a ton of talent on the offensive line. And while you can go out in certain positions and say, okay, plug and play a quarterback, for example. If you can go get a great quarterback, that'd be like Dylan Gabriel, right? Or you can go get a great wide receiver like Deion Burks. It'll help your receiver room. Or tight end, you can go get a great tight end or whatever it is. Offensive line is not one of those positions where you want to be trying to get 4 or 5 guys. Sure. Maybe one guy like a Walter Rouse a year ago, that really helps you
to come in and help a unit that had a lot of experience and a lot of
Yeah.
experience together.
And that's the issue. And Brent said that today. It's like you can't do it across the board. Maybe one or two guys, but across the board, it's extremely difficult to do, because the reality is, sure, there's probably a lot of offensive linemen that go into the portal, but there's a reason those guys are in the portal, and there's not a whole lot of quality offensive linemen that typically enter the portal like a Caden Green. So, it's a really tough spot to be in terms of having to rebuild it completely.
It's a rough situation. Brent was asked today about just expected improvement here from week to week. What's a reality and how much better they can get, as well as the road that they've taken here over the last couple of years in trying to rebuild an offensive line through the transfer portal, and really kind of the negative side of that when you see what you get here each Saturday. Here's Brent Venables.
Yeah, and again, I think that's it's been that again. Whether it's Tennessee or it's Texas or Auburn or South Carolina, there's that too. You're trying to baptize guys, getting them better, but just being better at the fundamentals, becoming more aggressive and physical. Another week of practice and the cohesion and continuity gives guys a chance to improve. You don't reinvent the wheel in a week's period of time. You just get better at the basics. Man, we got to get a lot better, and that's where the focus is just making improvement, and again putting guys in a position to help them have some success too. In a perfect world, you have high school guys that you develop, on that side of the ball. That group, the best performing groups, typically are ones that have spent a lot of time together. And if you went back and looked at all the guys that we've had over the last several years there, we've had a lot of turnover. We've had several guys that chose to declare for the draft early. I think my first year here, I think there was, I think we lost all the starters. I think I was hired in December. I think we had 4 guys that could have come back. They all left. And so we had to start over that year in 22. And we had some backups that were here. But and so every year I think we've lost both starting tackles after 22 and after 23, both starting tackles left. And so we haven't had a lot of guys that have been here for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And that, you're going to see that. It's hard for a high school kid to come in and be an impact guy at that position at any school. And but ideally you have, that position built up of, the foundation of high school guys that have been in the program and developed over the course of time. But we've missed on some guys. Several years ago, we didn't have this amazing group of backups that were ready when guys left. And that's, you want to build that if you're building it, appropriately. And so everything matters, when you're building that. And guys that, can be a great teammate, be a good player, but also be, go to class, make good decisions off the field, socially, and then be willing to put in the work to develop. And that's been a group that we've fallen short in regards to the transfer guys, that they've only been here for a few months. And so when you got to rely on the majority of those guys, you can lack some continuity in the chemistry, the things that we're talking about that enable you to be able to, execute at a high, consistent level. But at the end of the day, we do have some guys that have been here. We got to help them play better. They got to play better. We got to play tougher. We got to be more physical. We got to be better in pass pro. Our fundamentals. We're not winning a lot of matchups. We're losing a lot of matchups. There's not a margin for error with the guys that we're playing. But we got to help them do things that they can do. And so everything affects them, run game, running back play, quarterback play, receiver play, all that stuff affects them too. And so, again, right now we're not very good at any spot, let alone offensive line.
Ain't that the truth?
Ain't that the truth indeed? As he was talking the entire time, I think there's one, I don't know, I guess main point that kind of just started reverberating in my brain. Would that be the right way to say it? Sure. Just Andy Staples' article a couple weeks ago, talking about the offensive line and the misses that they had. Maybe the first time that we've heard Brent just publicly come out and say that they had misses. They had some poor evaluations in some of those classes that we have talked about before. But, kind of the one main theme, you have to be able to develop and sign kids out of high school and then develop them when they get to Norman.
And the unfortunate part, Eddie, is that they're bringing in one hell of a class this year, and we just don't know what it's going to look like.
Sure. And I would even add last year's class in with, I don't think people, as much as we talk about
Eddie
Eugene Brooks or Eddie Pierre-Louis, I don't think that they've necessarily given up, or I don't think anybody's given up on Daniel Akinkumi, a big-bodied guy that looks a little bit more like the part that I think Oklahoma fans are expecting. It's noticeable, though, when you go out there and you see even South Carolina and the size that they had on the defensive line as opposed to what Oklahoma has put out there for their starting five. So, again, I don't think that it gets better overnight. It's kind of like the offense as a whole, but I just keep going back to this idea that they can't be this bad. But
they are.
I guess they are. I guess I'm in denial.
But I think there's also, you mentioned some of those young guys. Put them in there. And I'm not saying start them, right? Like, I don't know if you can just go out there and start. I guess you can. It can't get much worse, right? But put them in for a couple series. I remember it was Brent's first year that they would play it. Remember, they would go out there and they'd play a whole different line for a series.
Yeah, they had line changes like in hockey.
Yeah, like do that. Like, what do you have to lose?
I mean,
it
can't get any more embarrassing. That's 20, embarrassing, but it can't get any more embarrassing.
You're a 20-point underdog on Saturday. At least get some of these guys some reps,
sure.
And especially guys that are going to be in your look. I think Michael Tarquin has done some really good things for Oklahoma. Spencer Brown, not so much, but those guys they're not going to be here next year. Branson Hickman, again, thanks for coming, but give Troy Everett as many snaps as possible. Hell, give Josh Bates a couple series. I know it's not been pretty with him in there, but he might be a guy that you have to rely on at some point. Like, I'm to the point where it's like, let's see some of these younger guys. Heath Ozida gets pulled after 9 snaps this past week. Let him play a little bit. Let the guy try to develop, get some reps. And again, I know that may not be the results may not be great, but the results aren't great as it is. So I've reached to a point where it's like, just and I'm not saying play all of them, but at least give a couple of these guys some snaps in these games and let you see what you have at least going into next year.
And it's tough because I do think that I think from a coach's perspective, and I've obviously never been a coach, but I think that you don't want to make your team or make the locker room feel like you've just given up on the season and you're building for next season. And it's a very thin line that they're going to have to walk here over the next couple of weeks as they kind of usher in whatever this new look is or whatever this fresh idea is going to be offensively. Brent Venables did talk about, and we kind of thought it was a really interesting point just in terms of what he's telling recruits or what he's telling commits right now in wake of all the news that came out on Sunday. I know that can be a emotional experience for guys that are already committed. It was an interesting conversation that he had today, though.
I think it was interesting from the standpoint of he's saying, look, we sell our program as a whole, right? It's not just, hey, you're coming to play for Bill Beatenbow or Emmett Jones or DeMarco Murray or whoever it is, Joe Jon Finley. Like, you're coming to Oklahoma to play for Brent Venables. You're coming to Oklahoma to, hold up the standard or, however they pitch it, the holistic view, the soul mission, all of that. And I think it was interesting for him to comment on that because he kind of says that, look, like you want to come to Oklahoma to play for Oklahoma, not just, position coach. Now, I know he's not naive to think that there's guys that certainly want to play for a certain position coach, that's part of the recruitment. But, I do think that it's an interesting question because moving forward, can they hold this thing together? And it's going to be really hard for Oklahoma to do, especially if they do have a ton of staff turnover, which I think we're kind of anticipating maybe that happening on the offensive side of the football. It's just too early to say. We said on the recruiting report yesterday with Josh, it's just like, it sounds like everybody's doing really well. Everybody is like fine with what's going on. But, again, what does that look like in a month when maybe some of these guys aren't on staff? It's going to be really interesting. But I do know one thing about Brent, and he's a great recruiter, and I do think he'll maybe be able to hold on to some more of these guys than maybe we're anticipating.
No doubt. Here is Brent Venables talking about his message to the recruits and commits following the news on Sunday.
Well, I mean, number one, before I take a commitment, I want to know why they're committing. If they say, well, it's just because of this position coach and that's it, and that's the end of the conversation, there's going to be a need for more conversation. I want guys that commit to the University of Oklahoma to enrich their lives, what this name brand, this university means to them, their families. At the end of the day, I'm the head coach, and it's important that the vision of the program and the decision-making process comes from an alignment, with the vision of the program and what they want for themselves through the program, holistically speaking. There is an offense and a defense and a special teams piece of it that's really important for all of these guys, and it can be very emotional. That goes without saying. But at the end of the day, they have to trust in myself as a leader, and certainly rest of the staff that's here right now. You continue to work on those relationships, but this isn't all of a sudden now you're talking to the guys, every day. You work diligently over the last several months, for some guys several years, at developing really strong relationships that are not going to be life-changing decisions, aren't going to flip the script, in the middle of a storm. At the end of the day, the vision is for us to have a high-scoring, explosive, diverse offense that recruits are going to want to play for. And there's a body of work here at the University of Oklahoma. We can have the best coaches, on the planet here at coaching and mentoring and developing, and we'll have that. So, that's really been the message for the recruits and certainly their families. And at the end of the day, I think guys that do commit here, there's a holistic approach on the field, off the field, systematically. Scheme, again, is important, and knowing that, we're not going to go to the triple option, with, moving forward. So we're going to have something that where we can attack people. We've got to be able to throw the ball and to have good balance in what we do from an offensive standpoint, and be aggressive in our approach, both in scheme, tempo, structure, things of that nature, things that are good for the game. But so that's none of those things are going to change.
Brent Venables talking about his message to recruits, and it's kind of one of those things, much like the offensive coordinator situation and the eventual search that we expected at the end of the season. Not a whole lot's going to be known here over the next couple of weeks. Kind of got to look in the mirror, or not look in the mirror, but just take care of your own business here moving forward if you're at the program.
We do know they're not going to run the triple option.
Ruled that out.
We can rule out Army's offensive coordinator, Navy's as well, Air Force. So I don't think they're going to go that route. But I do think it's interesting. Look, he's going to pitch these guys. I don't know who's offense coordinator is going to be just yet, but they're going to go out and make a great hire. And whoever that is, we're still going to be throwing the ball down the field to Elijah Thomas, right?
Sure.
We're still going to be running the ball with, different guys, or, Kevin Sperry's going to be able to still fit in a very good system, or the offensive line is still going to be developed in a way that gets you to the NFL. It's just kind of a hard pitch, I'm sure, at this point, because you don't know who's going to be on staff. But I do think his point's valid in the sense that, look, they're gonna go and figure this out, right? And I think that has to be the pitch right now to these guys is, hey, look, we don't know who it's gonna be, but we're gonna find someone that's great, and your play style, we still want you, right? Like it doesn't change just because Seth Littrell's out the door or any of these assistants are out the door.
Plenty of updates on, I know that Michael Fasusi, Ryan Foje, Elijah Thomas, Kevin Sperry, a number of guys Josh McCuistion has caught up with. You can catch all of his reporting on that in kind of, I guess, the fallout from whatever the decision that was made on Sunday night. You can see that on SoonerScoop.com, also on the Crimson Corner. Last but not least, Brent Venables was asked today about the future and where he kind of is thinking about going with the offensive coordinator position. It was something that, I think a lot of people that follow it had become well aware of. Jeff Levy, Seth Littrell, Joe Jon Finley, now they've all had ties to the Oklahoma program.
All grads, yeah.
He was asked on Tuesday if that's going to factor in his decision when he makes the hire for the next offensive coordinator. And here's Brent's answer.
Yeah, Brent, Jeff Levy, Seth, Joe Jon, all of them obviously played here, the latter two being promoted from within. When you look for your next permanent offensive coordinator hire, do you want someone with OU ties, or are you willing to kind of expand that to outsiders?
Yeah, I could care less about OU ties. That doesn't matter to me at all. I've hired some people that have had OU ties, and I've hired people that had never been to the state of Oklahoma before.
Seems pretty simple there. Maybe just something to put in the back of your brain, though, when the moment or the time does come that the national search begins for an offensive coordinator. I know that we got into some names on Sunday night in the instant reaction, as well as some names with Josh McCuistion on Monday.
I do think it's interesting because it's not necessarily just OU ties. Clearly, he's hired guys from Clemson. He's hired guys from Oklahoma that maybe he knows crossing paths with or whatever. So I do think it'll be someone he's somewhat familiar with. I would be a little surprised if there's not.
Well, again, because of the gravity of the hire. I mean, I think that this is going to be considered a hire that, whether it goes good or bad, is probably going to tell the fate of Brent Venables' time in Norman.
And that doesn't mean it won't be somebody that he's never coached with. I think that's still a possibility, but it would have to be somebody that, he knows someone else that would vouch for that person, or they've done it at a really high level in the SEC before or something like that. But I do think that it'll be somebody he's comfortable with. I know there's been a lot of chatter of you can't just keep bringing in OU guys, and you look at this staff, and they do have quite a few OU alums: DeMarco Murray, Joe Jon Finley, Seth Littrell, who was just fired, Brandon Hall on the defensive side of the ball. But he has gone out and made hires. Zach Alley, obviously no Oklahoma ties. Emmett Jones, no Oklahoma ties. So he's gone out and made hires that aren't just OU people. So, and there's not a whole lot of, going through it. If you look at the candidate list or, our hot board, other than a guy like Joey Halsley, who obviously played quarterback at Oklahoma, is on Tennessee staff as their offensive coordinator. There's not a whole lot of guys out there with OU ties as it is that are already in Oklahoma's program. And I also don't think Joey Halsley is really a candidate now, but I do think it'll probably be somebody from the outside. I think Brent knows that too.
No doubt. We'll get into more of kind of thoughts on the trip to Ole Miss coming up this weekend in the game day preview. Catch up with Zach Berry that covers Ole Miss for our On 3 brethren. And, it's kind of interesting. I was telling my dad, this is the first time that I can remember Oklahoma's going in, not just a 20-point underdog going into Saturday, but simply put, this is just maybe the first game that I can ever remember covering that I don't think that Oklahoma has much of a chance.
Yeah, is there a pathway to victory in this one? I don't think so.
You're gonna have to have a lot from the offensive side that we simply have not seen.
I think the last time that I felt that way for an OU game was maybe the college football playoff going up against that LSU team.
Yeah, 2019.
I definitely walked into that thinking I don't think there's any way OU can win this football game.
As it turns out, they might be one of the better teams of all time.
Yeah, they were fantastic.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back on Wednesday. We're going to talk to players tonight. On Tuesday, you'll see some of those interviews. Obviously, they'll all be up on the Soonerscoop.com editorial page, but we'll use some of that stuff from this evening. Probably talk to some of the quote-unquote captains or leaders of the team.
Get Owen Heineke out there.
Danny Stutzman, Owen Heineke. Had a
team
nice
captain,
play
shout
over
out.
shout out to him, Bishop Kelly, right?
Yeah, BKHS, Bishop Kelly.
What do you say? Fight, something like that at the end?
BKHS, Bishop Kelly is the best.
Okay, well, we'll see if you're ever allowed on the campus there after you, desecrated Father Lord on the postgame podcast on Saturday.
I went to church on Sunday. I didn't see you there, but
I told you I was altar serving at St. Charles Borromeo. That's going to do it for the show this Tuesday afternoon. My days have been really weird. I feel like today is like a Wednesday or a Thursday. It's still just Tuesday.
And basketball tomorrow, too.
Media day with Porter Moser and the Oklahoma Sooners. It's going to be good to get over to the Lloyd Noble Center, and then we'll be talking to Jenny Baranczyk and her top 10 Oklahoma squad next week, right?
Yeah, on Monday.
All right. I can't believe the basketball season is right around the corner.
I hate this time of year. To
The
be honest.
crossover?
I don't like the crossover. It's just not as everybody's obviously focused on football.
Yeah.
And the crossover, just the basketball just kind of gets in the way a little bit.
Because we cover it, I watch a lot more college basketball. The one that really hurts me is, NBA's tipping off tonight.
Yep.
And then obviously the future world champion, Oklahoma City Thunder, tipping off on Thursday evening. For George Stoya, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.